My mom grew up watching a classic late 70s TV series called Fantasy Island, a show where the enigmatic Mr. Rourke somehow makes the secret dreams of his well-heeled guests come true at a luxurious but remote tropical island resort, although twists of fate occasionally turn those dreams into nightmares. He is assisted by Tattoo, a little person who can be trusted to sing out as each group of guests arrive. I never knew about the series until after the fact and Mom told me, so when I went into Blumhouse's horror adaptation in early February, bad vibes were visibly speaking out to me, telling me not to risk it once I figured out that the crew behind Truth or Dare, including Jeff Wadlow, would be directing it. Now, given how unintentionally hilarious Truth or Dare just turned out to be, the only thing I was hoping for was that either Jeff can make a competently mindful experience, or this was going to be just as unintentionally hilarious as his predecessor. We do not get either of them. The characters here are rather bland and forgettable, but at the same time, the participants who want their fantasies fulfilled in the show don't have a whole lot of depth to them either, since every new contestant comes along every episode and every season. So I guess that didn't really surprise me when they did the same thing here. Roughly two-dimensional archetypes, rarely any stereotypes, barely any development for their arcs or their strengths or weaknesses. It's all just very, very lackluster. And I guess the same could be said for the performances in general. The performances here range from average to utterly dull. Maggie Q, Portia Doubleday, and hell, even Lucy Hale for that matter, are mostly committed and I guess solid with their given roles, while Michael Rooker came off as surprisingly very restrained and Michael Pena was incredibly miscast. Everyone else I didn't really care that much about. If you thought the performances were bad though, wait till you get a load of the dialogue.
Call of Duty time.
Enjoy.
You guys high-five a lot?
All the time!
Sorry, I'm double fisting.
Dazed and confused. Huh? You know, like that movie came out last year.
What am I looking at?
Your deepest desire.
Isn't there some sort of like guest fantasy confidentiality policy or something?
You boys can always take Patrick's bungalow and he can bungalow with me.
Once a fantasy begins, you must see it through to its natural conclusion. Nobody knew what you meant by that!
I'm not even making this up. Whatever the script composed as dialogue seems to largely depend on the random shifts in tone the film is played with. Oh, trust me, I'll get to that in a little bit. And none of it made for a good time. It legit reminded me of The Haunting of Lizzie McGuire. Like, oh my god. Once again, the characters exploit stuff that's literally right under your freaking nose, foreshadows the inevitable, and if that wasn't cringy or annoying, it had no effect on me. But then there are exposition-filled one-liners that rear its ugly head, which are not only complete garbage, but they happen almost every 5 minutes. I'm not even
They have to constantly explain what's happening at that moment or something that went on in their lives as if the audience hasn't already seen enough to get the full picture. The film treats you like a... Ugh. And the thing is, whenever the film decides it doesn't want to treat you like a dribbling dipshit, it's just way too convoluted to even fully understand. Whenever it tries to be whatever genre it's ripping off, it just fails miserably. It makes me wonder why the hell Wadlow was even the one writing and directing this again. Outside of the film not knowing what it wants to be, Jeff once again can't even decide on the consistent direction as he struggles to settle down on the right tone. From the half-assed scare sequences to the hails of blood that come from everywhere to 3 completely random, out-of-nowhere, connected-to-nothing shootouts, it ranges from a psycho thriller to a horror film to slasher flick to stoner comedy to romance to war film to revenge flick, and it just does not do a good job at portraying either of those. The romance falls flat, the drama feels heavily phoned in, the action is completely out of left field, the stoner comedy has some rather atrocious levels of humor, and the supposed horror elements just do not make any sense. Seriously, do I need to risk repeating myself over the scares again? They're either laughable or poorly executed, or a combination of the two, and you can see them coming a literal mile away. It doesn't matter how you intend to do it. The rapid shifts of genre and total inconsistencies show that there was really no defining vision of what and how this film was supposed to be, and it just comes off as just a jumbled pile of toilet paper that someone used to wipe their own ass with. It is so schizophrenic and so nerve-wracking, and the pacing is all over the damn place as a result. I took my little brother to see this film with me back in February, and even he admitted that the second act of the film went by way too slow. He literally began falling asleep halfway through that while he was wide awake for the first and third act. But even with those 2 acts, the film was like 2.5 hours. It's like, how long do you need to drag this on for? Cinematography and editing wise, they're both handled rather poorly. Now, I can't necessarily speak for the cinematography, but the editing is just really, really wonky. It's mostly noticeable during the action scenes due to how fast and ridiculously quick the camera snaps back and forth from one scene to the next, and if you know me, you know I hate those type of scenes. The whole premise and concept of the show made almost each and every single one of the episodes come back around to the same messages. Be specific with what you ask, be careful with what you wish for, and now sometimes getting what you want isn't always going to work out the way you thought it would. To be fair, those messages are just so overblown and done to death that you barely even get any credit for using those stories anymore, but back then the execution made it look possible to look past all of that. Here, it's the total opposite. Whenever the movie has its seeds planted to get you into a position of anxiety, the writing tends to make said overall execution extremely annoying as well as utterly incompetent. And every time it tries to make sense of whatever the hell they just said, it only ends up creating more questions. Almost every decision made here was done wrong. Nothing really adds up together. Moments that are meant to garner an emotional reaction out of you instead make you go far or roll your eyes in the back of your head. And whenever the story gets more and more outlandish with its reasonings behind whatever random contraption it has to muster, it just makes less and less sense. If the characters had more depth and the performances more flair to them, then maybe the execution would have been a lot more than what was given to us, because in trying to show everyone the dark side of wish fulfillment, it instead squanders and tarnishes the very premise that the film already had going for him from the title and source material alone. It gets hung up on all of its convoluted rules of its reality-bending locale and intertwined soap-opera backstories of the guests, which lead to one galaxy brain twist after another that basically cancels the other one out, rather than just convey the actual fantasy of the premise. You already had everything you needed to make the movie an interesting display of psychological trauma. Why muck it up by adding more to an already fleshed out formula? Any potential lessons to be learned or completely retracted and detracted in favor of more confusing melodrama that, I kid you not, everybody saw coming. It literally felt like as if they were just making the stuff up as they went along. The twist in general, okay, to be frank, the very first twist, near the end, actually wasn't terrible, but not necessarily original either. It actually kind of was intriguing. I don't remember something like this happening in the show, but there was this sort of like thing where I was like, okay, at least that instance makes some sense. Up until it didn't. There was another twist after that, and then another one, and another one, and another one.
Another one.
And these Shyamalan-like twists that just kept coming and coming and coming, and sweet jumping Jesus, they just make the movie go on even longer than it really needs to. And then
I was this close to my real-life fantasy, but all of you turned it into a nightmare!
Yeah, this chick is a long story. I've been holding back on talking about Lucy Hale's character because the very inclusion of her into the story is pretty much the full encapsulation of how obsessed this movie is with its own dickish and convoluted plot controversies and inconsistencies. So basically, Melanie made a call to Mr. Rourke way ahead of everyone else, so a revenge scheme to avenge her would-have-been lover against JD, Tattoo, Patrick, and Gwen, because they're either witnesses to Nick's death, or if they caused it and did nothing to stop it. Sloan was just the bonus and sees why Melanie was so insecure and bottled up with all this spite and hatred. I wouldn't mind this twist if, again, the movie actually made sense. Seriously, think about it though, think about it. How do the soldiers hear the grenade from JD's fantasy and Patrick's fantasy? If everyone really is in Melanie's fantasy the whole time, why is Melanie fantasizing about the others' fantasies? Why does the Magic Rock decide to go spoiler-free in Melanie's ultimate fantasies, knowing snippets of other people on the island, but not actually showing them what she wants to do with them? Why does her plan depend on the island controlling the fantasies, or Rogue controlling the fantasies whenever the script finds it convenient? Why is the island considered Sloan a guest even though she was kidnapped against her will? How did Melanie even find all these guys who were responsible for the— God, this movie is shit! I think the main reason why I ended up putting this film so high up on the list is because on the surface, in concept, and especially in practice, this should not have been the wreck that it was. Fantasy Island could have worked as a thriller, or a comedy, or a drama, or a horror film. Hell, if they had actually managed to balance the elements out, putting them all in at the same time would have actually been a stroke of genius. But then that only raises the question if doing that would have saved us all these vacant characters, pretentious dialogue, and lackluster production values, because if that was the case, it's like, oh my god. Damn you, Sony.